long and fruitful partnership. Professor Leah Smith, for listening to our needs. I would like of our staff and allow me Isbe Fayejuf, Famara Fufana, Awa Fufana, Adam Drame, Ya Anki Jane, Jaina Badsanyan, Sheriff Jame, Omar Bajo, Mortalanda, Diture, Oya meeting program. I'm looking forward to attend. Gambia Barak.
Hygiene Tropical.
Good morning, Dr. Lamin Namitas, Parliamentarian, Unit at LSHTM. 5 years, 1998 we worked with the unit or in the LSHTM in 2018, and I've only been director of the school, as we call it, LSHTM, for just over a year, so I can really take no credit, or almost no credit, but I remain enormously proud of the unit, its incredible scientific contributions, and the way it's built expertise, not just in the Gambia, but more widely in the region. And getting to know the unit and the Gambia a little more over the past year or two has been a real pleasure. I've especially noticed how trusted the unit is within the Gambia. What an integral and important part of this beautiful country the unit has become over the years. And when I'm out and about and I talk to people just in the street or on the ferry or whatever, and I say I'm associated with MRC Gambia, I get a nice smile and a nice nod of acknowledgement and sometimes even a thank you. And it's quite touching, and I think it's really indicative of the high regard the unit is held in. I am proud of the role the school LSHTM has played over many years, not just the last 3 or 4 years, but the school has a very long history of working with the unit, over decades of strong partnership working. And we'll hear more about that in the next few days. So the unit and it's done amazing work in that area and done great contributions, but it's also successfully diversified into other areas we'll be hearing all about in the next few days, different vaccines and infections, including malaria, maternal and child health, and now really breaking new ground in new areas, data science, genomics, health and climate change. And it really does, this moving with the times and this ability to move with the times really does bode well for the future, I think. I want to pay tribute to the Medical Research Council of the UK, whose far-sighted support for the unit over many years through many challenging political storms and opinions. The unit to untap the potential, Umberto and his whole team and all the staff at the unit for their fantastic work and success, particularly in their most recent 5-year funding review. And that vital core funding really does create a great foundation for future work. And it is going to be a very competitive funding environment we'll be working in nationally and internationally over the coming years, but I really do see the unit going from strength to strength. Of course, thank you to the President and indeed the whole Gambian government for hosting and supporting the unit over all these years. And also a chance to highlight and pay tribute to the support and collaboration of the University of Gambia and the Ministry of Health. And that close partnership working has been so fruitful and so important over the years to improving the health in this country. I'm really looking forward to the next few days. Please do stop me to say hello. We've got a great few days ahead. With that, I'll say thank you.
Sponsors of the MRC, but he's kindly...
Honourable Technology Executive Director, London School of Hygiene and Tropics, the London School of Hygiene and Tropics, gentlemen. I am truly delighted to be in. It's a real honour for me to acknowledge the incredible package of a partnership with the government. We're discussing some of these achievements for us all. First of all, the Medical Research Council remains committed to supporting research for global health. We are a UK government funder, but our interest has never been limited to the United Kingdom, diseases of the United Kingdom, or United Kingdom health alone. And the unit here represents the single biggest investment that we've ever made in this important area. The exciting research like maternal thinking about infectious disease, scientific questions and opportunities that lie. And the depth and range of exciting programs here can be seen in the agenda that will be covered in the forthcoming few days. A real illustrator and world's its latest round of funding, working together to deliver scientific pathogen and sequence. Also develop and gain the skill. This is a particular strength and capacity strengthening to continue to use our partnerships and indeed in partnership with the lives of people and to strengthen the team here of micro-Newton to sustain funding support, international aid, follow-up of a coordination policy on hepatocellular cancer on the past research, one of the burden in the region through the ground active house design, the trial of mass drug the azithromycin study that has successfully accounted for 7. Let's look at the subsidiary and the sustainable health impacts and everyone who is about to hit by saying, and the people of the Gambia over very many decades. That relationship with the community is really at the heart, continuing well into the future. This just leaves me furthering MRC. It has been my
beautiful resounding in London, John. Statement by you of MRC, a video Professor Umberto, you can present us an overview.
Yeah. And just there are 5 general longer healthy life, early and mid-career research, and equal partnership with West Africa research academic institutions, including the University of the Gambia, and create mutual opportunities for both research and capacity building. To continue promoting a healthy research culture, ensure equity, diversity, and inclusion principle across the unit. And then the last one is really to become more efficient in terms of operational and financial management. So, but our research program is really built around the issue, the major health issue facing West Africa, including the Gambia. This is one slide that shows, I mean, it's very difficult to see, I can realize that, but anyway, you should believe me. This is the death rates in children under 1 Western Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest burden of deaths in children under 1 month. And then here in red, you see the major causes: neonatal sepsis, neonatal encephalopathy, preterm births, lower respiratory infections, diarrheal disease. We work on most of these diseases. If we look at the death rate in children below 5 years, still by region and cause, again, West Africa. But if you look at the causes of deaths, these are malaria, lower respiratory infection, diarrheal diseases, nutritional deficiency, and other non-communicable diseases. These are the most common. And again, we work on most of these diseases. Maternal mortality, major problem here is maternal mortality ratio, so number of deaths by 100,000 births by African regions, Central, Eastern, Southern, and Western Sub-Saharan Africa. You see the Western Sub-Saharan Africa, you are here at around over 400 deaths per 100,000, which is huge. And again, we have a program that tries to look at maternal and neonatal health. But most of these causes of death are due to infection, but this is changed to become more and more important in Sub-Saharan Africa: stroke, diabetes, and so on and so forth. You see that by 2015, compared to 1990, the rank of non-communicable disease has increased, has gone up, and this is due to a combination of changing food habits due to urbanization, aging population, sedentary lifestyle, and so on and so forth. And yes, this is a projected growth of the urban population up to 2050, and you see that by 2050, more than 50% of the population in Africa will be urban, with about 1 billion people living in cities, and this actually needs thinking about what are the best tools, the best approaches to prevent diseases in an urban context, which would be very different or quite different from a rural context. And then the other issue is climate change, carbon greenhouse gas emission, which are going to provoke climate change. We can see it already with flood, heat waves, climate change, which is increasing vector-borne diseases, respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, impact on mental health, and added to Africa, because Africa has been the continent with the lowest emission of carbon over the past years, going to suffer the most from this climate change. So we need to really look into this and try to find ways of mitigating this problem. So our strategic vision for the unit has been thought through this situation. So it's been formulated to respond to the raising challenges faced by Sub-Saharan Africa. As I mentioned before, our overarching aim is to deliver research evidence that will generate knowledge supporting the path to longer and healthier lives due to the control, elimination of infectious diseases, including outbreaks, decrease the unacceptably high burden of maternal and neonatal mortality, address malnutrition, including diet-related metabolic diseases through discovery in science, and then address the rising burden of non-communicable diseases with special attention to those related to urbanization and climate change. So this agenda, these objectives are shaped by what I said before in terms of situation of the problem that we have to tackle. And we try to do this also. This is extremely important. Clinical trial support, we do quite a lot of clinical trial, providing laboratory services that are accredited and they are excellent. So our examination here, which I'm leading with Professor Anna Roca, who is in the audience, vaccines and immunity, led by Professor Beate Kampmann, and then nutrition and planetary health, led by Professor Andrew Prentice. And beside these three teams, we have three cross-cutting areas, which are maternal and neonatal health, West Africa, and planetary health. Now, as you see, this structure is, I'm going to explain what are the core strategic platforms. So our research is based on our capacity provided by core strategic platform. We are very much involved into London School of Hygiene Tropical Medicine Center. You have some of them here. And the vaccination is also here. I mentioned before the Center for Epidemic Preparedness and Response, which is not here because it's just been launched, but also the Center for Climate Change and Planetary Health, and so on and so forth. And also we have a very strong training department, career development, that is, led by my colleague and friend, Professor Sanjay. So this is the structure, and you see you have here the teams, you have here the research services, and by the way, we are going to invest in data science because we think that data science is really something that is going to become extremely important, is already important, but it's going to be increasingly important in the next few years. And then here you have the core strategic platform with genomics, and I'm going to show some example. Surveillance epidemic preparedness, which we have to still develop, health and demographic surveillance system, and then chronic disease and urban health. And these two are going to be developed in the next few years. Just to show that we have experienced quite explosive growth over the last few years, and you see here the number of projects. At the moment, we are about 120, 130, this is still 2021, 120, 130 projects ongoing with about something like between 18 to 20 clinical trials ongoing. So, and our model is quite unique within the MRC family because MRC provides support for our core functions, so key positions, support of the lab, support of clinical work, but all our research projects are supported by external funding, so we spend quite a lot of time looking for resources. And we are across the Gambia. Here is the number of staff in different locations across the Gambia. Here, Fajara, Kenneba, we have a field station, Bassa, we have a field station, but we have staff embedded into other Ministry of Health facilities, and thanks a lot for this. This shows a close collaboration with the Ministry of Health. And also, I just want to say that the field station, one in Canada, one in Basse, have a state-of-the-art laboratory so that we can actually process and do investigation of samples very close to the field where the samples are collected. So the idea is to have a high-tech platform close to the field, and able to do as much as possible on site without sending sample abroad, if possible, and without sending database abroad, having the capacity to analyze sample, having the capacity to analyze data sets here. And one of the recent developments is our molecular laboratory building that was opened in October 2021 with our high-performance computing, which allowed us to do groundbreaking research. And this is one of the examples, the COVID testing. We were able to sequence COVID, isolate SARS-CoV-2 viruses, and then able to see the different variants. These are the different waves. This is the time, the different waves of the different variants that were in the Gambia. But also, we have this health demographic surveillance system. There are 3 sites, about 300,000 people, and these allow to look at trend in demography. And I mentioned before that the Gambia reached the Millennium Development Goal 7 years before the deadline of 2015, and this is the evolution of the child mortality over the years between 1988 to 2008. You can see the huge decrease of child mortality, but although neonatal mortality remained roughly the same. And so this provides to the Gambian government also information about the evolution of disease, the evolution of mortalities. So some achievement over the last 5 years. For COVID-19, we support the MOH response, Ministry of Health response. It identifies SARS-CoV-2 variants. For malaria, which is close to my heart, we characterize the residual transmission in the Gambia, show the flow of malaria parasite between west and east, look at drug resistance and also population structure of the parasite across Africa, and these were always done in close collaboration with the National Malaria Control Program. For the maternal and neonatal health, as I mentioned before, maternal deaths is a major problem, neonatal deaths, neonatal mortality is a major problem. So we have 24 projects we have 24 projects in 2016, representing about 17% of the whole research portfolio. And I would like to mention, this is something that is very important for the vaccine immunity team, the work that has gone into, thanks to the Professor Beate Company, also at Clark, maternal vaccination to protect both pregnant women and their offspring. And for pneumococcal diseases, the introduction of the vaccine was followed by 80% decrease on invasive pneumococcal disease, 60% reduction in severe epoxy pneumonia. For TB, there was a program on childhood TB. This resulted in 50% increase in childhood TB notification rate, and also the identification promising biosignatures, so signature that can allow the production of new diagnostic tests. And for nutrition, just to mention the fantastic work looking at the influence of seasonal conception on the offspring of epigenome, so on the baby, and the effect, the potential effect that this seasonal conception and also nutrition that differ between different seasons can have on the health of the baby and the adults coming after the baby. So, but again, I mentioned again, for malaria, there's been decreased malaria transmission and burden, thanks to the National Malaria Control Program, but also to the use of tools that the unit was able to evaluate. And the EPI vaccination card, as you look at that, we have, for example, the Gambia was the first country in Africa to introduce hepatitis B vaccine in 1986. The first country in Africa to introduce the Haemophilus influenzae type B vaccine. The second country to introduce the pneumococcal vaccine. And then you have, for example, the introduction of the meningitis vaccine in 2013, rotavirus vaccine in 2013, and the human papilloma virus vaccine in 2015. So this is just show how the work done by the unit in collaboration with the Ministry of Health translates into interventions. We have also, I would like to strengthen this, we have a societal impact. We are well embedded in the local community across the Gambia. We are a well-recognized brand. There is a high sense of belonging among the staff. We are a major employer. So we have actually an actor of local development. And we provide health care through our clinical services, but also in many Gambia government health facility together with the health staff of the Ministry of Health. And we have, over the past year, tried to invest into a green campus to have a lower carbon print. And so we have, for example, the largest roof solar installation, at least at the time I was doing the slides, one of the largest solar installation in West Africa that provides something like 25% of our electricity consumption. Training, I mentioned, this is very important. We have 4 leadership development programs and then sub-regional and international capacity strengthening initiative. And here is a snapshot of the trainees between 2017 and 2022. We had 245 trainees, most of them Gambians, 197 of them were Gambians. And you can see it divided by PhD, by type of training, PhD, MSc, BSc, and professional certified course. And basically, before PhD, most of the trainees are Gambia. The PhD, we are about half Gambians and half from other African countries. But also, we provide opportunity for young people to come and do an internship. And we had, during the same period, 835 interns. And you see there where they were, how they were divided, support services, laboratories, and clinical services. 621 of these were Gambians. And under one, other African, and about another 100 from across the world. So, and this is just to look how many early postdoctoral fellows we had, mid-career postdoctoral fellow. You can see here the names. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but just to show that we have quite a lot of Gambians here and quite a lot of scientists from other African countries. And not only this, but people who have passed through the unit, they became global health research leaders. And here again, some example. For example, my friend Dayo Ifedayo Adedifa, who is now director of the Nigerian CDC. Joseph Okebe, I was his supervisor, his PhD supervisor, is now at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. Julia Mwesigwa, I was also her supervisor, and she's now with PATH in Uganda, for example. I'm just mentioning a few I know. And also Amaba, deputy executive, actually is the director now of the NANA. So, in terms of MRC contribution to healthcare delivery, I just want to mention the clinical service department, 100,000 consultations per year with 1,000. So, I think in conclusion what I'd like to say is that in the next 5 to 10 years we are going to increase the human capital and continue our training capacity building activity. We would like also to use advanced technology, investigate, evaluate advanced technology to improve healthcare delivery access. As you can see from my presentation, we like to think we are an incubator of talents. People coming to the MRC de Gambia, getting training, and maybe going away in other places, in other institutions to work. And so eventually significantly contribute to further develop research capacity in West Africa. I think this is the last slide. Thank you for your attention.
Explain of the MRC work and the contribution MRC is playing in supporting health system in this country as well, and capacity building of Gambians as well as West Africans. We're hoping this will continue. So in order to move on, I think we will display the history video, which will be about 20 from Professor David Navy. So can we start the history video of MRC? This is when MRC really started in 1947 up to date, and the different directors that actually man the institution. Can we play it, John? Can you increase the volume?
The MRC Laboratories, the Gambia, is today the UK's largest investment in medical research in a developing country. The unit's research from its inception focuses on infectious diseases and nutritional problems of immediate concern to the Gambia, with the aim of reducing the burden of illness and death in the country and the developing world. MRC research activities in the Gambia have developed over the 75 years to position as an international center of excellence in research and training, preceding most of the country's other institutional structures. The events that led to the creation of the MRC laboratories and largely determined the unit's initial research program began 17 years earlier. In 1936, an advisory committee on nutrition in the colonial empire was set up at the request of the Secretary of State of the British colony. The committee recommended the creation of research in field studies on diet, health and physique in different colonial territories to be supported by the Colonial Development Fund. The Fajara Human Nutrition Unit was proposed to represent a field research station in a colonial territory by the Advisory Committee on Nutrition, and this was supported by the Research Council. In early 1947, Dr. Benjamin Stanley Platt, who was then director of the MRC Human Nutritional Research Unit and principal advisor on nutrition to the Colonial Office, recruited Dr. W.T.C. Berry to lead a nutritional field working party at Jineri in the Central River Division of the Gambia Protectorate, in the site of the 55th British, which was used to house flight crews for housing clinical and laboratory staff. Besides the house and also overlooking the sea was a bungalow that was good bed. Research ward was opened in 19K, became the first matron. Mrs. Ann Lusak was employed as the first Gambian nursing sister. In the importance of endemic diseases in terms of their impact on health and in suggesting new lines of research into factors influencing nutritional status. As in 1953 in the colonial territories. The laboratories then became directly administered by the British Research Council and Dr. John Newsom, the director of the laboratories. During this time, Dr. Ian McGregor, who was recruited by Dr. Platt in 1949, had established a set of village-based studies in Keneba, Manduar, Jali and Katonkunda, investigating the Newsom was succeeded the following year in 1954 by Professor Ian as director of the MRC. Over the following 30 years, McGregor's group studied patterns of growth and survival within communities and defined the prevalence and importance of various diseases, yellow fever, measles, whooping cough, and non-communicable diseases such as hypertension, anemia, and antibodies in protection against malaria for the first time, and the effects of malaria on birth weight and child growth. McGregor's basic immunological observations laid a solid foundation for our understanding of acquired immunity today. By this time, trachoma research had also been introduced in 1956 by Dr. Leslie Collier, director of the MRC Trachoma Research Group. The broader program of research made the Council consider the hospital in Fajara and the Bush station in Keneba essential assets of high potential value. McGregor's work in the 1950s showed that Bell 61, for instance, killed a quarter of the children. Another highlight during McGregor's directorship was the launch of Lady Dale, a laboratory ship on the River Gambia donated by Sir Henry Dale, the then chairman of the Wellcome Trust and the trustees in London in 1958. Dr. Ian McGregor returned to Britain after 20 years and Dr. Bray was appointed director. In 1974, Professor Roger Whitehead, recently evacuated from the MRC unit in Uganda due to insecurity fueled by Idi Amin, expanded the nutrition research in Keneba and with postdoctorates Anne and Andrew Prentice, conducted seminal trials of maternal supplementation to improve birth outcomes and lactational performance. The role of early childhood infections and of persistent gut damage in limiting child growth was also established. In 1978, Ian McGregor returned to fill in as interim director. Dr. Brian Greenwood got appointed as director in 1980. Dr. Greenwood, a virologist, and a Sierra Leonean biologist, Hassan Musa King. Brian established a new program of work with an emphasis on intervention studies against important local infections such as malaria, schistosomiasis, and hepatitis B. 2 new field stations were established to support such studies, whilst the scientific direction of the Keneba field station. The newly opened stations were Basse Field Station in 1982 and Farafenni Field Station in 1983. Prevention of malaria and Basse in the Upper River Division as a focus for studies on schistosomiasis or bilharzia. With the increasing development of communication during this era, such as road transport, telephones, and computers, which facilitated the strengthening of partnerships, MRC collaborated with the Ministry of Health of the Gambia to evaluate the Gambia's primary healthcare program, particularly in ways in which this program could contribute to malaria control, that is, on chemo prevention and implementation of insecticide-treated bed nets. Pioneers of these control efforts were Drs. Brian Greenwood, Joan Bradley, Bob Snow, Pedro Alonso, Kabir Cham, and Umberto de la Sandro. In Basse, Dr. Andrew Wilkins and Dr. Hagen worked on the episodes of reinfection and treatment of schistosomiasis and showed the importance of antibody development in maintaining protective immunity in adults. In 1986, the Gambia Hepatitis Intervention Study was launched, which was the first large-scale vaccination project in the Gambia in which the introduction of national hepatitis B vaccination, or HBV, of young infants was carried out progressively over a 4-year period for the prevention of liver cancer. Following the hepatitis B vaccine trial, the Haemophilus influenzae type B, or HIB, conjugate vaccine trial was carried out under the direction of Kim Mulholland. This trial was based on detailed results of epidemiological and clinical patient studies that showed pneumococcus and Hib were the most important causes of pneumonia and meningitis in children in the Gambia. Also in 1986, an HIV research program started when it was apparent the infection was posing MRC clinic. Epidemiological studies showed an unusually higher prevalence of HIV-2 infection than HIV-1 in the country, and that many of these infections have been acquired in Guinea-Bissau, which is the epicenter of the HIV-2 epidemic. In 1988, MRC then established a new field site in the Guinea-Bissau village of Cayo in collaboration with Dr. Peter Abbey of Staten Serum Institute and the Health Ministry of Guinea-Bissau. The biannual surveillance and survival analyses in the Cayo HIV-2 community cohort and the case control studies at the MRC Fajara clinical cohort enabled the description of clinical, immunological and virological features of HIV-2 infection as compared to HIV-1 infections. It is through these studies that it was found that HIV-2 infection is of a lesser progressive disease than HIV-1 and elicits better qualitative protective response. By the early 90s, the unit's training finished. In 1994, the unit became an affiliated research center with the Open University of the UK, which enabled local staff to take higher degrees while continuing to work in the Gambia. This was an important development, as West African scientists and technicians have an increasingly important role in the unit's scientific activities. From this time to date, the unit offered research skills and academic training for Africans that resulted in many well-qualified scientists with MSc and PhD degrees. Some of these have positioned themselves in international research and academic spaces either within the unit or abroad. As the partnership of MRC with the Gambia government continued to grow from strength to strength, some staff from the Gambian government Ministry of Health were included in such training opportunities. In 1995, Professor Keith McAdam took over from Professor Greenwood as director of the unit. Professor McAdam introduced TB and non-communicable disease research into diabetes and hypertension, which he headed, and revision to the existing research program that included a pneumococcus and hemophilus by Richard Adegbola. This program was underpinned by laboratory science or bench, epidemiology or bush, and clinical research or bed. In 1997, one striking research output was the analysis of data kept from 1949 to this date in Keneba that showed season of birth predicts adult mortality in rural Gambia. The seminal study of births and deaths in 3 Gambian villages dating back to 1949 demonstrated that people born during more recent research has shown that the mother's diet at the time she conceives a baby has a profound effect on programming the baby's epigenome with lifelong consequences. In 2004, Professor Tumani Kora was appointed director of the unit. Beginning of this period saw major intervention studies carried out by the unit, which had a subsequent impact in saving lives, and Professor Maybe showed a reduction of trachoma prevalence flies where controlled with insecticides. This study and many subsequent interventions of the strategy known as SAFE, or Surgery for Advanced Diseases, antibiotics to clear Chlamydia trachomatis infection, facial cleanliness, and environmental improvement to reduce transmission, in 2021 earned the Gambia the second country after Ghana to have eliminated trachoma. Thus, the people of the Gambia would no longer have their sight threatened by this potentially blinding disease. In 2005, two major milestones in intervention studies were achieved, namely the successful completion of the pneumococcal vaccine trial in Basse and the elimination of Haemophilus influenza type B or Hib disease in the Gambia, following the incorporation of the vaccine into the Gambia's extended program of immunization, EPI. In 2008, the unit went through a radical change in its funding support, as it was required through a business plan to operate on a project-based funding model which would entirely depend on the attraction of external grants for its research, whilst MRC UK funds its platform support. This research program would run under research themes, namely vaccinology, headed by Professor Beata Kampmann, disease control and elimination by Professor Umberto de la Sandro, and child survival by Dr. Stephen Howe. A West African platform to enhance sub-regional research collaboration was created and headed by Dr. Asan J. In 2012, the child survival theme was absorbed by the disease control and elimination theme, while the nutrition unit in Keneva became the third theme led by Professor Andrew Prentice. Two cross-cutting themes were created, maternal and neonatal health and West Africa. During this time, the unit engaged in varied research collaborations and increased its clinical trials portfolio on several interventions against diseases of public health importance. Highlights of some studies amongst others are, in 2014, the Global Enteric Multicenter Study, or GEMS, was the largest study ever conducted on diarrheal diseases in developing countries. GEMS discovered the leading pathogens causing moderate to severe diarrhea, or MSD, prompting the call for a rotavirus vaccine in developing countries. In 2015, a cluster randomized trial on the combination of insecticide indoor residual spraying and long-lasting insecticidal nets, LLIN, was shown to be no more effective in cutting malaria than LLIN alone. In 2017, a double-blind trial showed azithromycin in labor lowers clinical infections in mothers and newborns. This trial, called Pregnancy, was aimed at addressing a global health school of hygiene and tropical medicine in London. With its long history of quality research, its international recognition, and its contribution to health interventions in leading research to save lives and improve health across the developing world, the unit would now be best positioned in an academic institution to also contribute to global and public health education. Of recent, in addition to the increased clinical interventions during this period, the unit also witnessed the increasing development of research facilities and support platforms. During its history, the MRC unit, the Gambia, evolved through different historical periods. It investigated various human infections and non-communicable disease, fruitful relationship with the Gambian government. Through a long-standing partnership with the Gambian people, it has established unparalleled goodwill with the local population that enabled the provision of high-quality healthcare, training, and employment opportunities. The President of the Republic of the Gambia, His Excellency Adama Barrow, honored MRC the Gambia during its 70th anniversary in 2018 with this statement: "The contribution of this institution to the health of our nation throughout the years is difficult to quantify, but we know it has been immense. The research they have carried out has without doubt saved the lives of many Gambians."
Thank you very much. So if you just employ your indulgence a little, and we'll invite Professor Maybe, a veteran, as far as MRC is concerned, who saw it all, and will now give us some little bit of details that has been shown in the video.
How do I do the slides?
Can you please can you come and help us with the slides?
Is there a pointer?
David, can you come and load the slide? Here's a pointer, yeah.
Is that the pointer?
Slide.
Excuse me.
Is it folder? First day.
That must be the second now.
Second one, I think. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one.
Final form.
Yeah, that's the one. This person is not coming? Okay.
Yes.
And you will have to use the cursor. The cursor is, I don't think this works. So I use the cursor to move the slides.
Forward, backward. This one?
No, this one here. The cursor.
Okay.
Can I just share the screen, please?
Use the cursor. Show him how to use the cursor.
Okay, this for the next.
For the next one. Okay.
Is it working?
Thank you so much, Hassan, Your Excellency, President of the Gambia and Minister of Health. It's a great honor, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be invited to give this talk on the history of the MRC Gambia unit. It's also a challenge to try and compress into half an hour all the amazing research that has been done here in the last 75 years. So I'm very grateful to Hassan and Margaret Pinder for the video which we have just seen. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about some of the amazing research that has been done here and the impact that that has had. So in 1944, the MRC set up the Human Nutrition Research Unit at the London School, and the director was Professor Benjamin Platt, as you have heard, and he had worked before the war on nutrition research in Malawi, on Nyasaland as it was in those days. At the end of the Second World War, there were people starving in Europe, and attention turned to the colonies, and partly I believe this was to see if more food could be grown in Africa to feed people in Europe. We had the famous groundnut scheme in East Africa, which was a disaster, and perhaps less well known, there was a scheme to breed chickens in the Gambia at Abuko, equally unsuccessful because they all died of Newcastle virus. But Benjamin Platt was keen to go back to Africa, as he had worked in Africa before the war, and he came to the Gambia. He flew here. It took 24 hours in those days, apparently, with several stops. But he flew here with his colleague William Berry, another nutrition researcher, and they traveled around the Gambia. They found a disused military hospital, and John Walters was appointed medical superintendent in 1948. William Berry was sent to Janieri, as you saw, to study nutrition and look at ways to improve agricultural production with tractors and other things. In 1949, Benjamin Platt found about the school, and he had served during the war in Palestine and become interested in malaria. So we've seen pictures of this already, and this was the first publication from the ward from John Walters, a case of indigenous Kala Azar in the Gambia. This is visceral leishmaniasis. Staff house we've seen already. This was for visiting workers, also acquired by the MRC of Kenneba. And McGregor decided that Kenneba was the ideal place to set up a research unit, I think largely because there were no medical facilities whatever there at the time. So to look at what was happening in terms of nutrition and infectious diseases. This was the first publication from Kenneba, plasma protein levels in West Africans, published in 1949. And in 1952, McGregor published this health, nutrition and parasitological survey in Kennebah, because by this time it had become clear that infectious diseases and malnutrition were closely linked. And this was very interesting. He found that 55% of the population had Plasmodium falciparum malaria. This was 90% in children under 1. Mucorrhea bancrofti, cause of lymphatic filariasis in 36% of the population. Trypanosomiasis in 2.5%. And it's very interesting to me that these parasitic diseases seem to have disappeared from the Gambia over the next 30 years for reasons we don't really understand. And then hookworm and ascaris also very common. Thought I should also highlight the first publication from the Gambia by a woman, Barbara Bray, Nitrogen Metabolism in West African Children. I'm delighted to say that her grandson is now doing his PhD here in the Gambia. Not sure if he's here. Put your hand up. There he is, yes. So this, McGregor set up what was almost certainly the first and then in 1961 published this probably first description of early growth nutrition and mortality rates among rural African children. And the tragic thing was that he found that 43% of them died before their 7th birthday over that 10-year period. This paper, also published in 1961 in Nature, he had observed malaria over those 10 or more years in Kennebah and those other villages surrounding Kennebah. He found that severe malaria was only seen in young children, and it appeared that people acquired immunity as they got older after frequent exposure. So he took gamma globulin proteins from adults in the village, purified gamma globulin antibodies, and gave these antibodies to children with malaria, and showed that in many cases they were cured and resistant to malaria for some months afterwards. So this was the first demonstration of passive transantibodies which are being promoted as a way to finally eliminate malaria. So some other key publications from Kennebah. Mike Rowland came here with Professor Whitehead and did studies on looking at interactions between infection and nutritional status in children in Kennebah. And this was one of the other really groundbreaking work. Season of birth predicts mortality. By this time Andrew Prentice was in Kennebah, showing with the use of this longitudinal cohort data that early life insults, so poor dietary intake or infections could have a long-term effect on survival right into young adulthood. And then another of Andrew Prentice's papers here, effects on birth weight and perinatal mortality. These could be reduced by giving mothers dietary supplements during pregnancy. So some pictures of nutrition research in Kennebah, antenatal visits, to give food supplements, for example, to do that study, then measuring dietary intake in terms of calories and protein. And at one stage, here is a whole body calorimeter being delivered to Kennebah to study basal metabolic rate. I'm not sure if many publications came out of that. We'll have to ask Andrew. Then further really important studies. So the first comprehensive demonstration of what is now known as environmental enteric dysfunction. So damage to the small intestine as a result of infectious diseases promoting malnutrition. And then this amazing work, which Andrew Prentice is going to tell us more about later, all to do with the impact of maternal dietary intake on the genome of the infant. So moving on now to trachoma, which was mentioned in the video. So the cause of trachoma was not clear. In 1957, the first publication was published in China, where they thought they had identified what they thought was a virus which caused trachoma. The very same year, Joe Sova, a Polish microbiologist, arrived in the Gambia, sent by Leslie Collier, who we saw earlier, and he was able to isolate this so-called virus from the eye of an 8-year-old Gambian child and grow it in eggs. And this isolate was then taken to London and inoculated into the eyes of a blind volunteer and caused trachoma. So this finally proved that this so-called virus, which we now know as Chlamydia trachomatis, an intracellular bacterium, was the cause of trachoma. So as soon as this became known, this was 1958, the MRC trachoma unit built this lab in the compound at Fajara, and they started to grow Chlamydia trachomatis in eggs. They needed large numbers. They had a driver go around buying eggs every morning, and they grew large amounts of Chlamydia trachomatis to make vaccines. And 3 vaccine trials were conducted in the Gambia by the team, which consisted of Joe Sova, the Polish microbiologist, Shona, his Scottish wife, who was an ophthalmologist, and Leslie Collier and his team. And this picture shows Leslie Collier vaccinating a Gambian baby. And some of you may recognize the man holding the baby. This is Madabar Jame, who used to run our outpatient clinic when Tumani and I were in the outpatients, Madabar from Bakau. So 3 vaccine trials were conducted. At that time, they had done epidemiological studies, mainly in the village of Marikissa, and shown that trachoma was hyperendemic and the leading cause of blindness. 3 vaccine trials. The last one was performed in Salikeni on the north bank of the river, quite a large village. And Joe and Shona Sova lived in Kenaba. They used to commute across the river every day in a boat, which provided opportunities for some other activities, which you may see here. So a bit of fishing on the way and shooting. Unfortunately, the vaccines were not very effective, and other vaccine trials done in other countries were equally ineffective, unfortunately, so trachoma remained a serious problem. Mosquito behavior. Mick Gillies arrived. He'd been working previously in Tanzania to study mosquito behavior, initially in Kenaba, and then in Walikunda Field Station on the river close to Bansang, where they studied mosquito behavior in some detail. And the Lady Dale we've seen before, floating laboratory, which also had cabins people could live on. This was used mainly by the schistosomiasis research team led by Andrew Wilkins, because schistosomiasis was upcountry around Bassi. Unfortunately, the Lady Dale came to an end in 1973, and the Schisto team had to move into a caravan in Bansang to do their research. And here you see them in Walikunda. So this is Tony Wilkes on the left, who was a mosquito behavior scientist, and Joan Brown on the right, and in the middle, 2 members of the Schisto research team. Later, Paul Hagen and Ursula Blumenthal were recruited, and this was to study immunity to schistosoma hematobium. So Ursula was based in Bassi, By this time we had a field station there, and she studied water contact patterns, so who was going into the water, how many cercaria were there in that particular pond, how long were they spending there, so she was able to measure exposure, and then they looked at rates of reinfection and intensity of infection and studied the immune correlates, and they were able to prove for the first time that immunity does occur following natural schistosome infection. And there are currently schisto vaccine trials going on in the MRC unit in Uganda. So this was the first demonstration that that might be feasible. I arrived in the Gambia in 1978. I was a junior clinician, and I was told, so your first job every morning is to go to the gate at 8 o'clock, and there'll be people waiting outside who are sick, and your job is to decide which ones have malaria, because this is a malaria research station, send them into the ward and send the others to Bakau Health Centre. So I made myself rather unpopular by admitting some children with pneumonia and severe malnutrition, meningitis. But at that time, this was seen just as a malaria research centre. So McGregor had retired in 1974, been replaced by Bill Bray, whose focus was on malaria, but he had then left in 1978. Ian McGregor had come back as interim director while they recruited a replacement. And that was the ward at that time. So fortunately, the replacement was Brian Greenwood, senior in northern Nigeria, doing a lumbar puncture, working on sleeping sickness, and Brian was part of the Department of Medicine in a new medical school set up by Eldred Parry, sitting in the middle there, at the request of Amadou Bello, the Emir of Zaria. And this team has Brian Greenwood seated on the right as you look at it. You may also see a young Hilton Whittle standing at the back. Also David Worrell, also well known in the field of tropical medicine. So Brian and Hilton have been doing groundbreaking research in Zaria in northern Nigeria on meningococcal meningitis, malaria, sleeping sickness, and other infectious diseases. And they came to the Gambia, bringing with them some wonderful colleagues, Musa Hassan King, who we heard about earlier, a Sierra Leonean microbiologist, Andrew Tompkins, gastroenterologist interested in enteric infections. Brian recruited a number of other important new colleagues. So Ken Barrett was recruited to work on building. Ken had worked for many years in Sierra Leone in the Public Works Department, and his task was to build 2 new field stations in Bassi and Farafeni, as well as new labs and new accommodation in Fujara. Kevin Marsh was an MRC. He was head of the Wellcome Trust Kemri Research Station for many years. The Farafeni field station in 1983, studies on bed nets and malaria. So Andy Bradley on the left, another person who came with them from Zaria. Richard Hayes on the right as he looks, work in the Gambia. Farafeni, to study malaria epidemiology. 6 was the first paper to show that many people in these villages use bed nets. Their use was associated with protection against malaria. Then this study published the next year by Bob Snow and colleagues. Bob Snow was a demographer running the demographic surveillance site in Farafeni. First trial of insecticide-treated bed nets in the prevention of malaria, where children were randomized to treated or untreated bed nets, and it was shown that the incidence of clinical malaria was significantly reduced in those who slept under impregnable Spanish doctor and Steve Lindsay, an entomologist, both alumni of the London School, I'm happy to say, insecticide-treated bed nets on mortality in a cluster randomized trial. So some villages were given treated bed nets, some untreated bed nets. And this was what happened in the villages with untreated bed nets. So this is mortality in children children aged between 1 and 4. So you can see by season, towards the end of the rainy season, mortality increased considerably. This was in the completely stopped. And overall, deaths in children aged 1 to 4 was reduced by more than 60% of the world wherever malaria is endemic. So this was the first trial of seasonal chemoprophylaxis. So in countries where the malaria transmission season is quite short, such as Gambia and neighboring countries, giving, in this case, Malaprim every 2 weeks during the rainy season reduced mortality by 50% in children aged 1 to 4. And this finally led to the promotion of what is now called seasonal malaria chemoprevention in the Sahel region. This paper by Kevin Marsh, looking at antibodies to blood stage antigens of Plasmodium falciparum and their relation to protection from infection. So this study established the methodology for investigating the impact of immunological parameters on clinical immunity to malaria and was widely used after that. So in fact, over the next few years, based again in Farafenni. And on the left there is Marty Valmayans, who was involved in the hepatitis trial. This is Brian Greenwood in Farafenni with Manuel Patarroyo, a Colombian professor who said that he had a malaria vaccine which was highly effective in South America, the so-called SPF 66 malaria vaccine. So Brian invited him to the Gambia. There they are in Farafenni by this ancient, not effective at all. But then the next malaria vaccine to come along was the RTSS, which showed that this RTSS vaccine shows significant protection against falciparum infection. This vaccine is now licensed by WHO. The first trial of an artemisinin combination in the treatment of malaria in Africa was also done in Farafenni, in and around Farafenni. This drug, now known as co-artemether, was shown to be highly effective. And I'm sure Umberto will be telling us later about the massive trial of mass treatment with ivermectin and artemisinin combination treatment. So also in Farafenni and surrounding villages, studies were done on meningococcal meningitis. There was a major epidemic in 1983, 84, of this. These massive epidemics of meningococcal meningitis have been reported for many years in the Sahel region. Every 10 years or so, always in the dry season. This was a very large epidemic. And this paper was the first study of a meningococcal conjugate vaccine in Africa and led to the Gambia being chosen along with Mali as the site for the next study, which led to the licensing of the MEN-Afrivac vaccine which has now been given to more than 300 million people in that African meningitis belt across the Sahel. And those epidemics are now a thing of the past. Hepatitis B, we've heard a bit about in the video. So, first study done in the early 1980s showed that hepatitis B infection was very commonly acquired in childhood in rural villages in Keneba and Mandua. At that time, hepatoma was the cause of death in one Gambian man in 50, a horrible disease, untreatable, and often in quite young people. So the youngest I ever saw was 18 years old. And this is caused by chronic carriage with hepatitis B. And so this study was done looking at the age of infection. It was found it was not mother-to-child transmission. They were acquiring it during first 10 or 15 years of life. And this led to the Gambia Hepatitis Intervention Study, started in 1986 as a joint venture between the International Agency for Research on Cancer, Government of the Gambia, and the MRC. And 14 years later, it was shown that this vaccine was 94% protective against chronic carriage of hepatitis B. And we're awaiting the final results to see whether this translates into prevention of hepatoma. This was a very interesting trial design, a stepped wedge design where the vaccine was introduced first in one district, then in the next one. We've heard a bit about trachoma. This is Almomo Jame, Robin Bailey, and Yaya Dibba in Jali. So we started research on trachoma in the early 1980s to try and find out why that vaccine didn't work. We found that in Jali, just very close to Keneba, there were many people blind from trachoma, such as this lady in her mid-40s. At that time, the treatment for trachoma was tetracycline ointment, had to be given into both eyes twice a day for 6 weeks. And as you can imagine, giving ointment to a 2-year-old child twice a day for 6 weeks is not easy, so not very easy to do that. So Robin Bailey, this new antibiotic called azithromycin came on the market around 1990. Single dose seemed to be effective in treating genital chlamydial infection, so we thought we would see if it worked against trachoma, and this was a single dose of oral azithromycin compared with 6 weeks of supervised tetracycline ointment twice a day. And the supervised treatment had very high coverage. 6-month follow-up showed that the treatments were equivalent, but that reinfection was common because only individual children were being treated. So the next trial was a multi-center community randomized trial where villages were randomized to treat the whole village with azithromycin or tetracycline. Very good coverage in all villages. These were the 4 pairs of villages in the Gambia. You can see that active treatment, active trachoma, persuade Pfizer to donate azithromycin, called for the global elimination of blindness due to trachoma by 2020. We haven't quite got there, but more than 1 billion doses have been given. Trachoma, as we heard, was eliminated as a public health problem, and the early mass treatment has been shown to reduce all-cause under 5 mortality in Africa. And this was a wonderful piece of work done by researchers at MRC in collaboration with the National Eye Care Program led by Hannah Fahl. We've seen in children in West Africa, this study showed that the important causes are pneumococcus and Haemophilus influenzae type B in young children, especially those under 1, and them recovered completely. 45% either died or were disabled. So this was the vaccine trial which showed that the Hib vaccine prevented both pneumonia and meningitis. Vaccine, the incidence of H. influenzae meningitis fell from more than 200 to to 21 per 100,000. We've heard something about the first trials of conjugate pneumococcal vaccine, which can lead to serotype replacement by non-vaccine. That since pneumococcal vaccine was introduced in the Gambia, the incidence of invasive pneumococcal disease has reduced by 80% in children 2 to 59 months. And the vaccine studies go on. I won't go into this because I think Ed Clark and Beata are going to tell us about this. And finally, human retroviral infections. It was found that HIV-2 in particular was present in 5% of people attending STI clinics, and this led to the establishment of the Cairo program, World AIDS celebrations in Cairo, and detailed studies on the difference on the natural history, the immune response to HIV-2 and HIV-1. Thank you for listening, and I'm very sorry that given the limited time, I was not able to cover everything. Sorry about that.
Very good. Yeah. Who else can deliver this kind of comprehensive historical achievements, scientific achievements other than him? You know, I mean, thank you very much, Professor David Maybe. This was really excellent. It really gave the details of all the expose in the video. And we apologize to the non-scientists who are useful to follow. I'm sure it will serve a good. The Honorable Minister of Health of His Excellencies, Honorable Minister.
Republic of the Gambia, Mr. Adam Barrow, the Honorable Minister of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, colleague Honorable Ministers here present, National Assembly members here present, the Director, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, Director of MRC Gambia Unit at the LSHTM, former Director, Professor Cora, here present, other senior MRC officials and all MRC members here present, senior government officials in our midst, international and national scientists, ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted once again to stand amongst you to give this speech. It is a great pleasure to be part of the entire process of the 75th anniversary celebrations by the MRC. I'm sure the program of activities you are going to participate in will tell you how important this occasion is. We've seen the scientific presentations. It has given us the motivation to all become scientists today, hearing what you have just presented. Your Excellency, first of all, I start by complaining that in the entire hall, there are only 5 of us with a face mask on. The health minister is still putting it on. That means he's still supposed to be put on. Well, that's a humorous reminder. The MRC Gambia has made remarkable contributions with the good work conducted by the MRC Gambia over the past 7 decades has witnessed healthcare achievements attained. The Gambia government of the role of the insecticide-treated bed nets in the fight against malaria in the Gambia. It also made it possible for the Gambia to be the first to demonstrate the role of hepatitis B vaccine in the fight against this disease, and the same for Haemophilus influenza. Our collaborations over the many years on testing health interventions provided the Gambia with the trialed vaccines in the expanded program of immunization, also giving us the opportunity to be the best when it comes to EPI in the entire world, in the whole of Africa, more so in our region. And that has also enhanced our stance when it comes to the Millennium Challenge account. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a few years ago, before I became Minister of Health, I was a member of the Gambia government Joint Ethics Committee with the MRC that actually looked at the ethics behind scientific research. That's a very important committee when it comes to research governance. Now, a research paper was presented, and the question I asked was, what is... I'm sure everyone asks the same question when a research project is going to be launched. Patients are going to benefit, and the Gambian research subjects are going to benefit. And I think I totally agree. Now that we have all seen the benefit humanity has derived from all the good research work in the Gambia, and the Gambian patients are speaking, especially in the disease control strategies of our country. So therefore we thank the MRC for what by the MRC in the country. We have all seen what was presented earlier, quoted, the PhDs and so on and so forth of our young scientists in the country. This had started long before, but at this point we give special recognition to Professor Tumani Kora, because during his tenure we had seen a big jump. Continues under his successor, Professor Umberto. We've been working very closely together through the decades. Till today, that good work continues. The COVID-19 pandemic came as a big surprise to the entire world. Very difficult time for the country. Ministry of Health collaborated immensely, sharing technology, sharing techniques, and also sharing personnel. And we thank Professor Umberto and his entire team. Tasise, who was with us, he stood by us, and their immense contributions made it possible. That's also a remarkable. We had support with regards to equipment, and the partnership also included other entities like the European Union. Through their support with the MRC, we were able to do quite a lot in our COVID-19 response. The support of the MRC to the medical school, to the School of Nursing, has been remarkable, and we recognize their contributions as well. At the Ministry of Health has made it easier for us to work with the MRC. We're restructuring and looking inwards so that our collaboration with the MRC can be more meaningful, can add more value, sees over 50,000 patients annually at their clinical facilities in Fajara and Keneba, and we applaud them equally for that. That is complementing the efforts of government. So in summary, the MRC, Gambia, and the Ministry of Health collaboration has been very, very fruitful. When it comes to research governance, which is very important, because all this research work that is being carried out needs to be governed. It needs to go along the lines of good research practice. The Scientific Coordinating Committee at the MRC and the Gambia government Joint Ethics Committee of the MRC have been doing remarkable work to ensure that research is governed and the right things are done when it comes to human research. However, by ensuring democracy, the rule of law, and good governance, these are ingredients that need to be available as much as we want a lot more research to be carried out, but the research needs to follow the rules of the game so that the people are done, but a lot still needs to be done. The partnerships, so that the benefits can be maximized. We are looking at a situation whereby research work in each facility in the country leaves some capacity enhancement done, urge for local capacity building, have a component for local facility strengthening, because these are now going to be our bargaining chips. That at the end of conducting a particular research project, there's something left in the... Another area of interest, local research capacity building. That's the national capacity building. I think that's very important. Anytime we travel outside the Gambia, knowing the MRC is here and part and parcel of the Gambia, people expect us all to be research scientists because the MRC is here. That means the MRC has put the Gambia on the map when it comes to scientific research because of the high quality research that comes out of this country. However, there is a big gap between the world's class research capabilities of the MRC and that of the national research institutions. So without preempting what His Excellency is going to say, I'd be glad if he will task us, the MRC, the Minister of Health, and the Minister of Higher Education, Research, Science, and Technology, giving us a target to build national research capacity to a certain standard within a stipulated period. I think that will go a long way in ensuring that we get the fruits of research more and more. We are all getting a lot of benefit from it, but the benefit can be enhanced by trying to support the national research capabilities. Your Excellency, before I conclude, I wish to tell you that we are very proud to see quite a number of Gambians in our midst, young Gambians, who are part and parcel of the MRC, working, doing productive research work, and a lot of other West Africans or African students, or doctors, or research trainees, and research scientists who are working here, and also nationals from other countries who are all here. This means that supports good scientific research following good ethical principles. Once again, I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Samate. Thank you for your statement. I think now I will call upon His Excellency, the President of the Republic, to deliver his statement to the gathering. Your Excellency. Thank you very much. you very much, sir. Thank you very much. This moment, please.
Thank you. Sit down. Honorable Ministers of Health and Higher Education, Science, Research and Technology, Cabinet members and parliamentarians in attendance, Chief Executive Director, Director of the MRC Gambia Unit at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, international and national scientists, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, the British High Commissioner, it is a great pleasure to join you today to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the establishment of MRC unit, the Gambia, in our great country, the Gambia. The development of this institution to become an internationally recognized center of excellence for research and training in West Africa, and its contribution to improving health across the world over these many years deserve celebration. I will seize this opportunity to congratulate you for the achievement over these 75 years. The research carried out has without doubt saved the lives of many Gambians through the years and extended the lives of many more. The relationship between the Gambia and the MRC is unique. MRC is a popular and affectionate household name throughout the country. You build a special relationship with the Gambian government and our people over the many years that allow a body of high-quality research work to be established. The impact of your research in collaboration with the Gambia Ministry of Health can be appreciated. When our National Malaria Control Program reported a 40% reduction in malaria incidents 10 years ago, and the successful clinical trials and incorporation of vaccines against liver cancer and invasive bacterial diseases such as pneumonia and meningitis, among other preventive vaccines. I was particularly proud when in 2021, our Ministry of Health and WHO declared Gambia free from trachoma and blinding disease, being the second African country after Ghana to have eliminated the disease. This is thanks to your groundbreaking research and intervention over many years. You offer sterling support to the Ministry of Health during the COVID-19 pandemic in the advice on control measures and strengthening the capacity of the public health laboratory to enable state-of-the-art testing. The clinical and logistical assistance you provided to our public health institutions, Gambia Health Care services. The MRC to the Gambia extends well beyond health. I'm only informed that MRC is the fourth largest employer with 1,600 staff from 20 countries. Gambians representing more than 60% of staff. Your institution not only create employment opportunities, postgraduate training, so you offer colleges skills and certification. It was understand with the Gambia unit to support the of the unit 2018 with the world-renowned London School of and Tropical Medicine. This being an opportunity to train a critical mass of African scientists. I am hoping these opportunities will only increase in the coming decades, and because of the presence of your internal expertise holders in the Gambia, such as the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Technology. For give greater field in our healthcare delivery and health education work are a pride of our nation. And we are happy to join in this session of 7 years health zone. Thank you for all support efficient to the Gambia. I read national science. I think you will agree with me. Today is the day of the scientists. So this good and wish you will say productive session during the symposium.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Excellency, for that wonderful speech and statement. MRC, as I said, is very proud that you're honored to really attend this celebration. And I repeat, this is a testimony of your government's unflinching commitment to providing health in this country and for your people. We thank you very much for your speech. So we have now come to the end of the ceremony, of the opening ceremony of this 75 years celebration. I will want to urge you to sit down and allow His Excellency and the Cabinet Ministers to take their leave. Then we can now break for lunch afterwards. Thank you very much. I'm just informed that there will be a national anthem before the President leaves. So we can stand up for the national anthem. Funny. You need to